Chapter 8 of Love at Second Sight. "We're lunching with the Mitchells today," said Edith. "Oh, yes, I remember. I'm looking forward to it," graciously said Madame Frabelle. "It's a pity your husband can't come, isn't it?" "Ah, you naughty girl, I don't believe you think so." Madame Frabelle archly shook her finger at Edith. "Eglantine, have you really seriously talked yourself into thinking that Mr. Mitchell is anything to me?" "I don't say, dear," said Madame Frabelle, sitting down comfortably and bringing out her knitting, "that you yourself are aware of it. I don't say that you're in love with him, but that he is devoted to you, anyone with half an eye can see. And someday," she shook her head, "someday your interest in him may take you by surprise." "It is your interest in him that surprises me," said Edith. "He's a good friend and we like him very much, but for anything else—" "If so, it's really rather wonderful," mused Eglantine, "that you've never had a thought, even the merest dream, beyond your husband, that it has never even occurred to you that anyone else might have suited your temperament better." Edith dropped her book and picked it up again. Her friend thought she saw, whether through stooping or what-not, an increase of colour in her face. "It isn't everyone," continued Madame Frabelle, "who would appreciate your husband as you do. To me he is a very charming man. I can understand his inspiring a feeling almost of motherly interest. I even feel sometimes," she laughed, "as if it would be a pleasure to look after him, take care of him. I think it would not have been a bad thing for him to have married a woman a little older than himself. But you, Edith, you're so young. You see, you might have made a mistake when you married him. You were a mere girl, and I could imagine some of his ways might irritate a very young woman." After a moment she went on. "I suppose Bruce was very handsome when you married him?" "Yes, he was, but he hasn't altered much." "Yet, as I told you before, Edith, though I think you're an ideal wife, you don't give me the impression of being in love with him. I hope you don't take this as an impertinence, my dear." "Not at all, and I'm not sure that I am." "Yet your mother-in-law told me the other day that you had been such a marvellous wife to him, that you had even made sacrifices. You've never had anything to forgive, surely?" "Oh no, never," hastily said Edith, fearing that Mrs. Ottley was a little inclined to be indiscreet. "She told me that Bruce had been occasionally attracted, only very slightly, by other women, but that you were the only person he really cared for." "Oh, I doubt if he ever thinks much of anyone else," said Edith. A characteristic of the Mitchells' entertainments was that one always met there the people they had met, even for the first time, at one's own house. Here were the Conistons and Landy, whom Edith was always delighted to see. It was a large and gay lunch. Edith was placed some distance from Mr. Mitchell. Of course there was also a novelty. Some lion or other was always at the Mitchells. Today it consisted of a certain clergyman called the Reverend Burne Fraser, of whom Mrs. Mitchell and her circle were making much. He was a handsome, weary-looking man, of whom more was supposed than could conveniently be said. His wife, who adored him, admitted that, though he was an excellent husband, he suffered from rheumatism and religious doubts, which made him occasionally rather trying. There had been some story about him. Nobody knew what it was. Madame Frabelle instantly took his side and said she was sure he had been ill-treated, though she knew nothing whatever about it. She was placed next to him at table and began immediately on what she thought was his special subject. "I understand that you're very modern in your views," she said, smiling. "I?" he exclaimed in some surprise. "Really, you're quite mistaken. I don't think I am at all." "Really? Oh, I'm so glad. I've such a worship myself for tradition. I'm so thankful that you have too." "I don't know that I have," he said. "It's true then what I heard. I felt it was the moment I looked at you, Mr. Fraser. I mean that you're an atheist." "Oh, what?" he exclaimed, turning pale with horror. "Good heavens, madame! Do you know what my profession is?" He seemed utterly puzzled by her. She managed all the same, somehow or other, to lure him into a conversation in which she heartily took his side. By the end of lunch they were getting on splendidly, though neither of them knew what they were talking about. And this was one of the curious characteristics of Madame Frabelle. Nobody made so many gaffes, yet no one got out of them so well. To use the lawyer's phrase, she used so many words that she managed to engulf her own and her interlocutor's ideas. No one, perhaps, had ever talked so much nonsense seriously as she did that day. But the Reverend Byrne Fraser said she was a remarkable woman who had read and thought deeply. Also, he was enchanted with her interest in him, as everybody always was. Edith thought she had heard Mr. Mitchell saying something to the others that interested her. She managed to get near him when the gentlemen joined them in the studio, as they called the large room where there was a stage, a piano, a parquet floor, and every possible arrangement for amusement. Madame Frabelle moved quickly away, supposing that Edith wished to speak to him for his sake, whereas really it was in order to have repeated something she thought she had heard at lunch. "Did I hear you saying anything about your old friend Aylmer Ross?" she asked. "Yes, indeed. Haven't you heard? The poor fellow has been wounded. He was taken into hospital at once, fortunately, and he's getting better, and is going to be brought home almost immediately to the same old house in Jermyn Street. I think his son is to meet him at the station today. We must all go and see him. Capital chap, Aylmer. I always liked him. He's travelled so much that even before the war I hadn't seen him for 3 years." "Was the wound serious?" asked Edith, who had turned pale. "They were anxious at first. Now he's out of danger, but poor chap, I'm afraid he won't be able to move for a good while. His leg is broken. I hear he's got to be kept lying down 2 or 3 months." "Qu'est-ce qu'il y a, Edith?" asked Landy, who joined her. "I've just heard some bad news," she said, "but don't speak about it." She told him. "Bien, du calme, mon enfant, du calme." "But I'm anxious, Landy." "Ça se voit." "Do you think—" "Ce ne sert à rien. The best thing that could happen to him. He'll be all right. I suppose you want to see him, Edith." "He may not wish to see me," said Edith. "Oh, yes, he will. You were the first person he thought of," answered Landy. "Why, my dear, you forget. You treated him badly." "Then if he'd treated me badly, he wouldn't care to see me again, you mean?" "C'est probable," said Landy, selecting with care a very large cigar from a box that was being handed round. "Now, be quite tranquil. I shall go and see him directly I leave here, and I'll let you hear every detail. Will that do?" "Thanks, dear Landy. But even if he wishes to see me, ought I to go?" "That I don't know. But you will." He lighted the long cigar. End of chapter 8.